you talking about? Film's the greatest educational medium the world has ever known.
Hi, guys, and welcome back to Teenage Golden Age, a podcast where we talk about old Hollywood movies from the perspective of the next generation. I was really lucky this year to have press credentials at the Tribeca Film Festival, and through that, I was able to talk today with director Nanette Bernstein about her new HBO documentary, Elizabeth Taylor: The Lost Tapes. And I thought this was so perfect for our first episode of season 3 of Teenage Golden Age, so I hope you enjoy. To give a little background on the documentary, Elizabeth Taylor: The Lost Tapes allows Elizabeth Taylor's own voice to narrate her story, inviting audiences to rediscover not just a megastar of Hollywood's golden age, but a complex woman who navigated lifelong fame, personal identity, and public scrutiny on a global stage from early childhood. Through newly discovered interviews with Taylor and access to the movie star's personal archive, the film reveals the complex inner life and vulnerability of Hollywood's legend while also challenging audiences to recontextualize her achievements and her legacy. Nanette Burstein is a distinguished documentary filmmaker known for her Oscar-nominated debut, On the Ropes, and the acclaimed The Kid Stays in the Picture. Her work includes the Emmy-nominated Hillary docuseries for Hulu, and she has directed and produced numerous other award-winning documentaries. So yeah, to begin our interview, for viewers who aren't familiar with her, who was Elizabeth Taylor, and in what ways did Taylor defy the expectations of her era, both in her film roles and in her personal life?
Elizabeth Taylor was a movie star from the 1940s until her death in the 90s. And she died actually in the 2000s, but she stopped acting in the 90s. She was legendary. I mean, she was a megastar. And for the generation that doesn't know her, I mean, it's like Taylor Swift times 20, if one can imagine that. She was she very much defied the traditional roles that women played of that era. She as often as she could played strong-willed, edgy female characters. She also had a very big life off screen that caused a lot of scandal and public scrutiny that dogged her for much of her life.
Yeah, her life was so rich and she accomplished so much. And yeah, how did you start making documentaries and what kind of first drew you to Elizabeth Taylor?
I started making documentaries in the 90s. I'm dating myself here. I was very young. I was in my mid-20s actually when I made my first film. And I wanted to make documentaries because I love cinema and I love journalism. And I thought, I could make documentaries and do both. And I came up in an era where, movies started to change. There was started to become an audience for documentaries. There's also started to become the technology, like digital video and digital editing. It wasn't crazy expensive to make it possible. Especially if you're doing your first film, if you're doing a kind of raw, down and dirty story, you can do it on the cheap to start with, at least. And what drew me to it is there's just so many really amazing stories to tell in the world. And I think more than ever, we live in this 24-hour news cycle and we don't get the chance to really dig deep and explore stories in the way that would be more satisfying and more enlightening. I've had the opportunity to do stories about some very high profile people and or interesting high profile situations where the it was always at the time was depicted in this very black and white way, and it wasn't. It's like it's always the gray that's real life and much more interesting. So that's what drew me to documentaries.
Wow, very cool. And yeah, segueing into this new documentary you made, Elizabeth Taylor, The Lost Tapes. What's really cool about it is that, the public gets to hear these newly discovered tapes, which were recordings Taylor made in 1964. So how were these tapes discovered, and what new insights do the audio tape interviews provide about Taylor's life?
Yes. So in 1964, a journalist named Richard Merriman, who often wrote for Life magazine, was ghostwriting a book about Elizabeth, a biography. And he recorded all of their conversations, 40 hours of them. And they weren't meant, those recordings were just for his research. And they sat in his attic for decades. And after his death, his wife discovered them. And then it came to the attention of the Elizabeth Taylor estate that they existed, and they asked for them. And they thought, wow, what an amazing opportunity for Elizabeth to tell her story from beyond the grave. And they contacted my producers that I ended up working with, who contacted me, and we made this movie with them.
Oh, so cool. And it's so cool to kind of hear her story through her own voice. And how do these tapes kind of provide an intimate understanding behind Taylor's glamorous Hollywood persona? And how did it kind of break down people's previous misconceptions about her?
Yeah, so she speaks very candidly because she wasn't expecting people to ever hear these tapes. And, even with the stories that she told, when it came time to writing the book, she's like, yeah, you can't use a lot of that. But her estate was fine with us using all of it. And because, it revealed so much of who she was. And what was interesting about it, at the time she was this megastar, and it's so rare to have someone of that stature speak so candidly because they have to be so careful. So what's surprising is, is her level of insecurity that she had about herself. She says things like, oh, I wasn't too pretty inside, and I was thought of as immoral, and she thought that she wasn't respected as an actress, that she was seen as a sex symbol or a pretty face. The turmoil that she went through because of all the slut shaming that went on, given her private life that was became public. She had a couple of marriages that started with affairs with people she was married, they were married, broke up marriages. This was scandalous. She was considered a homewrecker. And, it was really tough. And, her level of the level that the paparazzi followed her was on par with, Princess Diana. And you can see this in the footage that we use. I mean, it's insane. She just speaks very openly about all of these different ordeals that she went through, and about, what she went through in her various marriages as well, and her movie career.
Wow, very cool. And it must have been really exciting to kind of get to hear, like, first hear the tapes and kind of see what she says about her own life. And yeah, I'd love to hear more about how you developed kind of the visual style of the documentary. What was the process of curating Taylor's personal photos, home movies, and clips?
Well, first of all, there's just a wealth of archival imagery of her. She was widely filmed and photographed, as well as all of her movie clips, in which, often life imitates art, or art is imitating life. And so we use those, and then her estate shared her personal archive, her home movies, her, snapshot photos, or more candid photos of her with her family, and her various husbands and her kids. And so, and there's, the film is fairly graphically designed, and certainly styled in the age of the era that it is in. The graphic design follows like a sort of 50s and 60s era, depending on what part of the film you're in. We often colorized a bunch of photos, and we colorized them in a way that they colorized movies back then, a sort of bigger, bolder colors. So that was sort of the thought process of the look to it.
Wow, how long did it take to kind of assemble the entire thing?
About 9 months.
Wow. Oh, cool. And yeah, why should teens learn about Elizabeth Taylor and why should teenagers watch Elizabeth Taylor, The Lost Tapes?
Well, I don't know if they should, but if they would like to watch it, it's a lot about what women went through in the middle of the 20th century and the arc of the women's movement in many ways. I mean, and it's also very relevant today. I mean, women are still getting slut shamed all the time publicly. Um, so I think that there is a lot that people can relate to. I think also if you're into cinema history and you like any of these films and are interested in her as an actress, that's an even bigger layer to it.
Absolutely. And to conclude our interview, what advice would you give to teenagers who want to start making documentaries and specifically about documenting people in old Hollywood? How can we honor their legacies?
Well, my advice I would give for teenagers that want to make documentaries is just go. I mean, you can go make a documentary on your iPhone, I mean, we have the technology now to do it cheaply, at least the first film you make, if you have a good story to tell, go tell it. Don't wait to try to get money or, don't put it off to another day. And you can start with short films and, you can cut on Premiere or iMovie.
Unfortunately, that is the end of this episode, but thank you so much to Nanette for being a part of this episode. And I truly can't stress this enough how much I loved the documentary, and I think all of you guys should go watch it on HBO. Elizabeth Taylor, The Lost Tapes. It's truly one of my favorite documentaries I've ever watched. And I feel like there's so many life lessons in it that I think we can all take from it. If you guys have any questions or comments, definitely make sure to email us at teenagegoldenage@gmail.com. That's teenagegoldenage@gmail.com. See you in our next episode. Bye.